Gail Foxcroft is a professional show jumper in South Africa. And her horses are more than just prize-winning investments. They are part of the family.
You're asking so much of the horses. You're asking them to do stuff for you. It's not about force. It's about, it really is a partnership, and you're asking them to really huge athletic endeavour that you ask from them. And the more they work with you, the easier it is, and the more likely you are to succeed.
So when her champion horse, Lindenberg, became sick, it was devastating.
He couldn't put any weight on his front feet. So we were icing his feet, as I said, thinking it was laminitis and thinking it was just an inflammatory disease. Then he started to get really shaky, and eventually he sort of sat down. He couldn't control his back. So obviously it's all neurological symptoms. And then he eventually lay down, and we couldn't get him up. He actually just could not stand up.
Were you trying to lift him up?
Yeah, we tried to do everything with him, and he couldn't stand up. And that, as I say, then when he eventually got to Onderstepoort, he could still lift his head, but when he couldn't breathe properly, so he had to have a tracheotomy.
The neurological symptoms became so bad, Gail made the painful decision to put Lindenberg down. But the symptoms didn't quite line up with the original diagnosis. It was eventually determined that Lindenberg had Shuni virus, one of the first cases here.
I think that was the biggest thing, that we needed to know yet another virus out there that we had to be careful of and we had to vaccinate for.
Like West Nile and Zika, Shuni virus is transmitted by mosquitoes. So now, Gail invites researchers to her horse farm to trap and test the insects.
I know that at some stage last year they found a huge number of the Culex mosquito that carries the West Nile, but they didn't find any of the virus in the mosquitoes. And we need to know how to control it, what steps we take, and eventually, hopefully, how to combat the disease, because it's something that has a huge mortality rate.
It's all part of the disease monitoring taking place here in South Africa, one of 10 global disease detection centers worldwide. The health of these horses is actually an early warning sign for what could be coming to humans.
Why is it important to have an early warning system?
So it's difficult in Africa relative to, for example, in the United States. When West Nile first emerged in the United States, they saw birds dying. So in Africa, the birds actually are genetically resistant many of the times, because these viruses have been around for many years. So if we can't use them then as an early warning system, but what we do is to then look for animals with the type of signs that we know is associated with virus infections caused by these vector-borne viruses. So, for example, neurological symptoms, encephalitis symptoms, if we see paralysis, if we see fever outbreaks in lots of animals, and then, for example, abortion storms. That's a way that we can then see there could potentially be a Rift Valley fever going around in an abortion storm, or the viruses that we look at in this specific study that have neurological signs in animals could be things like West Nile virus, and then these African viruses that we've identified, such as Shuni virus, Middelburg virus, and Wessels-Brown virus, for example, that also cause abortion in animals.
So why do you have to keep surveying all the virus threats all the time?
So by actually doing continued surveillance from month to month, we can see what the seasonality of these viruses are. We can see when outbreaks happen. We have an early warning system to determine if there's an increase in virus and in the vectors that carries them, and we can then potentially do something about it and prevent infections in humans and animals.
For Gail, it's not just about protecting humans, but her horses too.
You know, you spend years and years bringing a horse up to the top level. Apart from the emotional impact that it has on you, it has all the other impacts. It's financial. It's also, you have a top competitor starting his career, and the next thing you've lost it. And it takes years and years. It takes a minimum of 6 or 7 years to get a horse to the top level.
It was obviously a great tragedy that you lost your prize horse, but do you see maybe some good coming out of this research for humans as well?
No, absolutely. I mean, the fact that now that medical research is here every month to take samples and things, we have to know how it's spread or what the concentration of mosquitoes is is in a certain area at a certain time of the year, to know which are the bad times, when you've got to use a lot more protection, all those kind of things. I mean, it's vital. And the fact that people can get the West Nile as well, it's obviously a huge issue. So it's fantastic that they're here, and we support it wholeheartedly.